Well, good morning. I'll be the moderator today. I'm Gerry Braun, chair of the Integrated Renewable Energy Network. We have four distinguished panelists, Paul Fenn, Greg Thomson, Dan Kalb, and Gary Stern. And I'm going to ask them in a minute or two to introduce themselves and give their talk about their work on the subject of this panel and their perspectives on the subject. Subject basically is the future of local energy. It's it's stated a different way in the program using the term DER, distributed energy resources. And when I was thinking about that, I realized that comes from a perspective that probably is like the perspective of one of the panelists in the introductory sessions, distributed from the perspective of a distance. But we don't talk in our communities about distributed residents and distributed businesses and even distributed energy. We talk about local residents, local businesses, and local energy. And I think probably over the longer term that local energy resources is going to be more popular as a way of talking about things than distributed energy resources. But integrated is going to be very important. And just to kind of tee things up a little bit, a couple things that are driving this interest in what is the local energy business going to look like longer term. And we've heard it's almost impossible to predict, yes, and there are some scenarios, yes. But a couple of things that are really important. First is the plug-in things like solar panels and batteries. The reason that's important is they can be mass-produced, and they can be cheap, and they can be deployed locally. And then, of course, we have the trends toward decarbonization, decentralization, demonopolization, and democratization. These are all things that are flowing in those directions right now. And the question is, how does a local energy business stay with the flow, pay its bills, collect its revenues, and adapt as the changes that we were talking about earlier come forward. So the questions that I've asked the panelists to kind of think about in preparing for this is, I'll put my glasses on, easier to read the questions. What is the current CCA business model? What would a CCA business that integrates local energy resources look like? Can we imagine the evolutionary steps from the current business model to a mature business model reliant on local energy resources? And with that, I'd like to ask the panelists, starting, we'll go in this order. Paul Fenn, Greg Thomson, Dan Kalb, and Gary Stern. We'll go in that order, and I'm going to ask you again to introduce yourself, talk about the work that you do that relates to this longer-term vision, and your perspectives on that vision.
Hello, how do you do? Paul Fenn. Wrote the California CCA law, the years ago, and before that, the Massachusetts law, the original law, helped write the laws in New Jersey and Ohio, but have been working with CCAs on DER-oriented program design for the past 15 years, starting with the Solar Bond Authority in San Francisco in 2001, but in particular was involved from the first days in Marin Clean Energy, Sonoma Clean Power, and Clean Power SF. So it's been a long road, and just by way of background, there have been several leaps in the development of CCA since 1995 when the bill was first written. Back then, it was widely believed that renewable energy was simply more expensive than non-renewable energy, and so proving that renewable portfolios could be cheaper than non-renewable portfolios through aggregation was a step that took quite a few years to get CCAs to adopt in terms of their program designs and what they ask for when they go to the market. And then, in California, the switch to renewable energy quickly adapted a renewable energy credit-based approach to greening their supplies. And we've really been, in some ways, stuck in that track since 2005, 6, 7. With in the last few years, I would say a huge uptake in terms of the interest in DER as a strategy for CCA, and just not only in California but in New York. I also just spent the last 2 years working in New York on their program design for CCA for NYSERDA and the PSC. So there's very strong interest in New York in what's happening in California, and looking in particular at CCA as a post-Hurricane Sandy strategy and the opportunity to develop microgrids throughout New York State to provide a more resilient infrastructure for the next hurricane. And similar interest, I would say, in the city of Boston and a lot of Massachusetts communities focused on carbon and recognizing the more enduring greenhouse gas reductions associated with demand reduction than you get on a sort of rental basis with renewable energy credits. That being said, most of the CCAs that implement DER have generally conformed to conventional utility business models in the way that they try to get that. In particular, net energy metering and feed-in tariffs. In other words, using a tariff structure which is essentially generic, untargeted. There's not yet been any kind of effort to take advantage of the utility data, to analyze site-specific energy attributes, to target renewable technologies to match those attributes. Very little use of the data to analyze substation level impacts and dynamic loads at substations to achieve demand response benefits. And so there is another paradigm leap that needs to take place within CCA. And until that leap takes place, it'll be a lot like the late 90s when everyone said green power is more expensive. Today they say solar is more expensive, or they say that distributed renewables are more expensive. But they're wrong. And the reason that they're wrong is that net metering is more expensive. Feed-in tariffs are more expensive. But if DER is targeted in the proper way, particularly in the form of load reform, CCAs have specific load shapes, and their cost of service is determined by the peaking contours of those load duration curves. So if you strategically eliminate load duration curves through the targeting of DER assets, you're eliminating costs in the basis of service for every customer. You're not adding costs like you are adding costs through either a REC strategy or a net metering strategy. And so these are really the essential program elements that need to change and that increasingly I think are changing to look at targeting of assets, to specify non-exporting DER assets, which is the implicit meaning of IDER. You are not net metering, and instead you are therefore targeting, and you are targeting loads that coincide. They coincide with the generation curve of the DER asset. They coincide with the peaking curves of the load duration curve, and therefore there are savings there to be found. But furthermore, there's also the need for a greater customer engagement. The current models have all focused on essentially a blind marketing process, again, imitating the utilities. So feed-in tariffs, net metering tariffs, these don't engage customers. Customer engagement should be primarily focused on shared renewables products where there are equity benefits offered to customers. And shared renewables and community solar are becoming very popular all over the country. And the financial side has developed and matured a great deal in the past few years. So you have a lot of companies out there that are financing what they're calling community solar. Most of those systems are not locally owned. Most of them are actually absentee owned. Almost none of them are customer owned or community owned. And so there's a need to set the standard on the meaning of community solar, which means locally owned, community owned, at least once the tax benefits are taken by the financier, and that those benefits should extend beyond the payment, the month-to-month payment of customers. Right now you have a rental model. Even the CCA solar programs like Local Sol at Marine Clean Energy are essentially pay-as-you-go programs. It's green pricing based on a local asset, but that's not really community solar. And so if you want a compelling value proposition to customers that will get an uptake, offer them equity. They're paying monthly bills. Those bills should be converted to equity. Similarly, targeted energy efficiency, which again is focusing on the low duration curves and limiting the cost centers of the aggregate CCA, is very compelling. The savings on energy efficiency are dramatic. The paybacks are very rapid. If you want customer uptake, offer real value and get out of this premium pricing paradigm that essentially imitates utility systems. Let's see, otherwise, as far as components, I mean, when I look at the components, what I think Nirvana is, and first of all, you know, 3.0, CCA 3.0, I think is kicking the can down the sidewalk here. 2.0, as it's been defined, is essentially including these elements. And these are elements that can be implemented today. It's not a future. You know, the beauty of the Buddhist idea of nirvana is that you don't have to die to go there, right? Under the Christian system, you got to die first, then you go to heaven. But in Buddhism, you can go there right now while you're still alive. But it's based on karma, right? And karma is based on attachment, right? Attachment is what causes karma. So, but the attachment in this case is supply-side economics. We are attached intellectually to the idea that a CCA, I've heard this from many CCA managers, that they have revenue requirements. You see them saying this, well, we have our revenue requirements. This is utility thinking. And utilities have revenue requirements. They have debt service on transmission. They have pipelines. They have power plants. They have things that have to be paid for. CCAs are buyers. They don't have revenue requirements. And so the idea that somehow there's a conflict for a CCA to reduce demand is preposterous. And it's simply aping of the utility. So the primary barrier to DER Nirvana is not a market barrier. It's not prejudicial regulation. It's not even the PCIA. It's backward thinking of bureaucrats. It's backward thinking of the industry, unresponsive to this opportunity, particularly the retail electricity industry, which is incredibly unresponsive to DER as a concept, but also to the consulting sector, who are all specialists in procurement, who are indifferent to assets less than 10 megawatts, that just don't know anything about it and don't do it. So there's new work that has to be done by CCAs. You know, it is like Gerry said, it's local, it's small, it's detailed. And this is a different kind of work. But it can't just be this passive process of posting tariffs and putting up advertising and waiting for people to sign up for it. It has to use the database, and it has to use the CCA's special community relationship to the customer to make this happen in a more systematic and rapid way. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Greg?
Great, thanks. First, I'd like to thank Ann and Barry and Woody in the center for doing this. I think this is the third year. I've been to 2 of these. Just grateful to be here and be invited to join and be a part of this movement and this drive for what I also call local. We are Pathion. I work for Pathion. We provide local energy solutions to customers, be those government entities or property owners. And I got into this business about 4 years ago after being in software startups for many years because it just made sense to me. We have an enormous amount of resource in our communities that's local, that's not being tapped. And one of these great examples, of course, and I love this, is MCE putting 10 megawatts of solar on a Chevron refinery site in Richmond. Come on, poetic justice, huh? That's leadership. That's leadership, and all of us in this room and in this conference are here to lead us down the right path, and I'm going to talk quickly about what we think that right path is. And I'll focus on commercial and industrial if we go to the next slide. So this is the community energy opportunity. I spent a year working on analysis in the Hunters Point area to show that this is realistic. It's viable, it works with the grid, and it makes this local resource come alive, and we get all the benefits from it. And so if you look at any community, any population center, you have this resource out there, and it's basically untapped today. And we've done analysis to show that you can kind of equate populations with the amount of megawatts of solar that you can get out of that population. It's kind of one-to-one. 100,000 people, areas, we can get 100 megawatts easily. It's a conservative estimate if we just go after it in the right way. So that's one thing I want to leave you with. This isn't about a megawatt here, a couple megawatts there, or even 10 megawatts over there. It's about looking at your cities and your towns and saying we can do 40 megawatts. I looked at Roanoke Park, 40,000 people. We can easily get 40 megawatts there, for example. So now the reason commercial industrial works is not just because they have large rooftops and parking lots. It's because they also have large daytime loads, which means we're matching loads and generation when we put solar in those places. That works for the grid. And by the way, Commissioner Picker's comments about this isn't just about electricity is right, and this isn't just about electricity. When you get a bunch of solar that's local, you're addressing electricity, you're addressing transportation by converting transportation to electricity, and you're addressing gas because you're converting things like HVAC to electricity because you've got that local resource. So it's about taking advantage of that local resource and using it for greenhouse gas emission reduction. Motivated property owners, they own these properties. They want to make more money from these properties. They have tenants, they have businesses. This is not complicated if you think about it as a local resource, not as behind the meter, not as bill savings, but property owners who want to work with the CCA and get more value out of those properties. And there's grid value here too. You put solar and storage in the grid in these locations, you reduce the peaks, you provide grid services, you're actually solving problems for the utilities and the ISOs by putting these local energy systems in. Next slide. Benefits of 100 megawatts. Well, who would not want this as part of their community, right? 200 million in added local and regional wages, added jobs, the greenhouse gas reductions and water savings, et cetera. There's a lot of tools out there that explain these benefits. It's important to start communicating and broadcasting these benefits because they're local, they're for the community, and the CCAs are in place to actually make those benefits come true. Next slide. So why CCAs, right? So why CCAs? CCA plus DER, you see the typical CCA, diagram on the top, plus this opportunity in our communities, this resource that's untapped. Why do this? Well, the CCAs are empowered. They're the only governing entity, who are really empowered to procure community-wide local energy solutions that are targeted, not random, but targeted based on load analysis and at scale. And if you do that, you get the cost reductions that will actually make DER, and especially solar plus storage, come down even further in cost in the distributed or local systems. So this is new economies of scale that we can all achieve by doing this type of program. And then that gives the CCA even more financial strength versus the utility model. So this is strengthening the CCA business model, hedging against volatility, and creating a financial way that CCAs can procure lots of local energy and have that be a long-term advantage to them as a procurement entity. Customers as partners, right? So you want to engage, you do customer engagement, but have these property owners become partners to you as a CCA. You're benefiting them, they're benefiting you, and these property owners and the ratepayers are sharing in this local resource, shared local resource with both the economic and energy benefits that brings. Then, of course, you're getting large greenhouse gas reductions by doing this. Next slide. So the primary reason that I'm here today is because I wanted to present this particular project. So we're going to make this real. So the promise is leveraging these optimized resources in the communities to do all the benefits we can get out of them. And we're going to make this real. We have a CEC grant that we were awarded with MCE as the lead. Terra Verde, Pathion, Center for Climate Protection, Association for Energy Affordability, all of us were on the team, and we proposed that Marin Clean Energy, MCE, was the local government entity to lead this particular project. So what we're doing here is we're designing and deploying a replicable model so that CCAs can identify the right locations, develop the right financial models, which I believe are not quite there yet. I don't think feed-in tariffs are right either. There's a better financial model for a governing entity to invest in local infrastructure, which happens to be energy. Optimize the system value. So looking at the load shapes, reducing the aggregate peaks, providing those benefits to the grid. We have inherent inefficiencies in the centralized model for energy delivery. A lot of the conversation this morning kind of came from that point of view rather than the point of view of look at the benefits and advantages of a local energy system. Start with that. CCAs are in the position to actually design and deploy that and to demonstrate those benefits across the entire system. Lowering all costs across I mean, one of the key costs in DER today is customer acquisition, because we don't have a governing entity going out with a program to target the right places and make it easier for customers to sign up. So there's a whole bunch of costs in customer acquisition we can get off the table. That's a huge benefit. And that's also economic leverage for CCAs. And then eliminating the existing barriers. So we have something like maybe 2% penetration of distributed solar in California as the leading state in the country. We've proven through our models we can be at 25, 30% penetration. And the benefits of that are huge. So why are we so low in penetration? We can be up here. Well, we have to remove those barriers of lack of an entity to actually deploy this, target it, and provide a financial model that makes sense to everyone. And the CCAs are really at the point of being able to do this, the right people to do this. So we're excited about this grant project. It kicks off this year, and it'll be a focus for not only MCE, but the point of it is to provide a replicable model for all the CCAs to go look at, use, provide input to, and we'll be working with Cal CCA as well to broadcast, promote that model around the state. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And Dan.
Thank you. So our moderator said 5 to 7 minutes. As a politician, what I hear is 50 to 70 minutes. So if I go more than an hour, just cut me off. So first of all, I also want to thank the organizations that are hosting this for doing this, a very important conference. And every year, I'm quite sure it's going to grow in interest and attendance, and so that's great. I also want to give a shout out to Paul. Paul really is one of the fathers of this whole movement, and he's worked for 20 whatever years on this, and I just want to thank him for his great work and give him a little round of applause. But both he and I, when we were first involved in energy issues, had more hair on our head. Okay, so I'm a city councilman. Check our bios in the program. We don't need to talk about our bios. Just look when you have a chance. That's fine. But I do want to say that I'm vice chair of East Bay Clean Energy, which is right now the Alameda County's new CCA. We're so new we haven't yet flipped the switch to serve customers, but we are officially formed, and we plan to flip the switch, if you will, probably in a little less than a year or so. One of the things that this has done in a positive sense, and I may be jumping around a little bit, is it's brought together local elected leaders and clean energy and environmental advocates to work on something together. Now, that's not brand new, that people have worked on things together before, but the reality is that most local elected officials throughout California are not, contrary to what they like to call themselves, I would not call them really strong environmentalists. Even in the cities where you think they would be, they're still not. And I'll give you just one example, since Commissioner Picker mentioned the importance of degassing, if you will, our households and so on. I propose that we require new buildings built in the city of Oakland, that's where I'm a city council member, be all electric. and it's almost like I was talking a foreign language from another planet to my colleagues, let alone developers. So we have a long ways to go in many communities, including our more progressive cities in our state and the state legislature, to doing all the things we need to do to get to our carbon reduction or carbon-free future, as Commissioner Picker kind of alluded to or explicitly said. But this effort to bring clean energy advocates, environmental advocates, and so on, working together with local elected officials, this is one pathway to make that happen even more, and I think it's going to produce a lot of, I hope it's going to produce a lot of benefits in terms of better or additional new good policies. As we put together our joint powers agreement to create our CCA, we, as it was the case in other jurisdictions, had a lot of pushback from certain elements of our good friends in organized labor. And we decided we didn't want to go into this in an adversarial way. So we brought some of the trade unions and such and other unions together in a lengthy process that went on for well over a year to get to a place where all those interested parties felt good, where we can go forward. And so we actually put, I'll read off a couple of things here. We actually put things in our joint powers agreement, which is to some extent binding, of course. It says things like, establish a portfolio that prioritizes the use and development of local renewable energy resources and minimizes the use of unbundled RECs. Demonstrate quantifiable economic benefits to the region, including union prevailing wage jobs, local workforce development, increased local energy investments, recognize the value of workers in existing jobs that support energy infrastructure in Alameda County. As we shift to clean energy, commit to taking steps to minimize any adverse impacts as part of a transition, if you will, to a new I can't say new any longer, to a more robust clean energy economy, deliver clean energy programs and projects using a stable, skilled workforce through such mechanisms as PLAs, project labor agreements, other workforce programs, apprenticeships, and so on. So those things I just rattled off, most of those things are not in most JPA agreements in local CCA entities. We put it in ours for a good reason, and that we feel that if we're not working together with our workforce, organized or otherwise, that it's going to be harder to be successful in a big way. And so that's what, hold on a second, that's what we did, and now our challenge is to kind of operationalize that. Local jobs, PLAs, obviously we all want local. Do we use the term DG any longer? Am I just like behind the times? Is that I still use DG. We could say DER, we could say ABC, I don't care what you call it. But I think there's agreement that we want to have an increasing percentage of our electricity generation come from local in some fashion. And what that means, you know, is it going to be customer owned, as we've all aspired to? We're just starting out. East Bay Clean Energy is just starting out, and we're going to start out in a way that's going to make sure that our customers are going to pay competitive or lower rates than PG&E, because if we don't, then they're all going to, half of them are going to opt out, and then we don't got nothing. And so we're going to do it in a very careful fashion, but with both eyes towards getting local projects built, planned, developed, built in a way that keeps the rates down and maximizes our opportunity for reducing our greenhouse gas footprint. And I think, as we know, why is my phone buzzing? It's not Donald Trump. That's okay. All right. So we know that one thing that Commissioner Picker said is we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan. We don't even have a study to get to a plan. And so I think what the PUC needs to be doing is, with other agencies together, is spending a couple years or whatever it takes to create really an in-depth study with options as to what a regulatory structure and everything that goes along with it might look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and how do we transition to it? So we don't have a plan because we don't yet even have a study which would then lead to a proceeding and then lead to a plan. And right now they're just doing a few kind of hearings, if you will, which were great. I attended one of them, and a lot of issues got on the table. So they're not yet prepared to, they don't yet know what their future holds for them and what they think should be the future. Many of us in this room don't either really know what that's going to look like. But what we do know is someone's got to start doing some kind of comprehensive study that gives us our options for what our regulatory future will be throughout the state as more and more CCAs are created, more and more rooftop solar is also purchased and developed. And if there's one thing we should do to the PUC besides tell them to lower the PCIA charge, and as you heard from our Sonoma Clean Power person, require the IOUs to sell off or parts of their long-term contracts so the PCI charge won't need to be as high. I'm kind of jumping around here, so I apologize for that. I think what Commissioner Picker also said about more and more renewables is great. It's not our end-to-end goal. It's an important means to get to our end goal. He's right. Electrification, reducing our natural gas usage, electrifying our transportation system, all those are more energy efficiency, of course. All those are important a part of this. And CCAs may be able to, should be able to play a significant role in that whole package of that whole suite of solutions and programs and policies. At least my goal is to have the East Bay Clean Energy to play a significant role throughout Alameda County and wherever else we're involved. 1 minute. Keeping rates competitive. It's a challenge to do a large number of medium and large scale clean energy projects locally, however you're defining local, in your service territory or really close to your service territory, and at the same time keep all your costs down if you do too many at once. Yes, we know we could do that. It's possible to do that. Let's do that in a planned, measured approach so it's successful. It's successful and people buy into it. Yeah, that's it for now.
And now, thank you very much, Dan. Gary Stern.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I am the investor-owned utility representative on the panel. I know I've been portrayed a little bit by Mr. Cyphers and even our current panel as kind of like the villain and the enemy here. I do want to dispel those rumors. I think one of the objectives here is to find how IOUs and CCAs can and will need to work together, and that's, as I'll explain, that's going to be particularly relevant associated with the development of distributed energy resources. I've been at Edison for 32 years. My background is as an economist, and I'm the director of energy policy, so that's enough of the intro. Let's go to I have one slide, and there aren't any words. It's just sort of background, a picture of the future. But before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the CCA IOU roles and relationships, which might require a small amount of rebuttal from some of what you've heard today. I want to talk about distributed energy resources and the different ways in which we're going to be getting more of them in the future and how we get them today. And then I want to talk about that future and these relationships. So for IOUs and CCAs, as you've heard, our procurement is not how the company makes money, earns financially. Two consequences of that. One, it means that we don't lose earning opportunity as a company when part of our energy is being served by somebody else like a CCA. So if the rules are right and our customers can be adequately protected, as you heard about before, the indifference that's sort of required by law and also obviously important to us, then we want to and we will be indifferent to communities choosing to take the power and control into their own hands and serve their own customers' needs. The other side of that, though, is that it actually is difficult to sit and listen to somebody say that because we don't make money on procurement, we don't care about the costs, and therefore we don't care about our customers. As you people who serve communities and seek to serve the energy needs of your communities, do you think that you would not care about the costs that your customers bear? Clearly you would. That's why you're here. Well, we're no different. We care about the cost to our customers. We have very professional, sophisticated procurement activities, and we've been doing this for a long time. It's all overseen very closely and carefully by the Public Utilities Commission, and we do as good a job as we can. The only degree to which we have longer-term contracts than we might like is that we've been required to through decision after decision. We constantly seek for shorter terms, and we're constantly told, no, you need to do this. So, you know, we don't want to be the villain that we're being portrayed as. We want to be able to work together towards common goals of serving the needs of our customers. What about distributed energy resources? Clearly, that this is a growing portion of the future in our industry, and it's clearly the direction, and I'll talk a little bit more about the picture later, that we see the future going. Here, this is just a picture that shows a lot of renewable resources at the distribution level, electric vehicles, and basically a distribution system that we envision the future is going to look more and more like, and that we have to find a way to make as effective and reliable and affordable for customers as possible as we seek the clean energy future that all of us in California aspire to. So what are the ways in which we're going to see this growth of distributed energy resources, and what have we seen to date? First, of course, is the sort of organic growth that has gotten us to where we are today. Customers wanting to put solar on their rooftop, pursue energy efficiency and demand response, and get electric vehicles. And by the way, I live what I preach on this front. I have an electric vehicle. I have solar on my rooftop. I've pursued a lot of energy efficiency in my home, so I believe what I'm talking about here. So we have and we will continue to see a lot of that sort of organic growth. Then there's the targeted procurement, and some of this relates to what you've been talking about in terms of local renewable energy in your communities, which would be trying to seek growth of these distributed resources in a particular area to serve either of a couple of needs. One, and the one that we've, for instance, been engaged in, is pursuing local reliability needs. An example of that is after the San Onofre power plant was shut down, we recognized that if there's load growth, or when there would be load growth in South Orange County, we don't want to have to put in new gas-fired plants or build new transmission to serve that load. So we pursued a program of preferred resource procurement, basically distributed energy resources, to serve any potential load growth that might occur in that area, and to date we've been successful at doing that. So that's one way in which you may be seeing growth of distributed energy resources, as well as procurement to meet a local reliability need. In the case of community choice energy, you're talking about pursuing local procurement to meet local energy needs. You have energy needs you want to provide from your customers. You want to do what you can to see that that is procured locally from renewable resources in your area. That's another perspective of targeted local energy procurement that we expect to see more and more of in the future. And the final one, and the one that perhaps most directly relates to the need for effective coordination and relationship between IOUs and CCAs with regards to distributed energy resources, is this notion of distributed energy resources as an alternative to wires investment, as a distribution providing asset on the system. We're pursuing that through various regulatory processes at the PUC today, where we would be going out to do procurement to see if it's possible to procure in a local area a set of distributed resources that can forestall the need for investment in traditional wires and satisfy the needs of our customers. But those resources are not only going to provide the reliability need that would otherwise be met through distribution investment, but they're also going to provide normal energy and capacity to the grid. So imagine then for a moment that this were happening, if this were to happen in an area where we're not the energy provider, but there's a CCA. So we've got is a local distribution need, which is a utility need that would be met through this portfolio of distributed energy resources. But this portfolio also is going to be providing the energy and capacity which the local community choice aggregator in this hypothetical would need. So now you've got a distributed energy resource that's providing two services to two entities. Distribution reliability services to the local distribution utility, and energy and other services to the community choice aggregator. We're obviously going to need to figure out how to effectively coordinate, cooperate, and contract so that both the reliability services can be provided and the energy services can be provided, and presumably do this in a way that maximizes the value for the investment in distributed energy resources in the first place, because that's going to satisfy all of our needs and objectives, including the customer's own interests in this space. So, you know, we certainly see a vision where we're not really competitors so much as collaborators and cooperators in serving the various needs of customers in the space. And ultimately, that's the vision that you might be able to overlay with this. I mean, here our focus in creating this is you know, the distribution system and the local generation and clean energy needs for a clean energy future that we're trying to achieve in California. But there's no reason to believe that it's the utility that's providing the energy needs of these customers as opposed to a CCA. Either way, we have to make it work effectively to satisfy the reliability, affordability, clean energy needs of the customer with a grid that's capable of doing so. And so that's kind of the cooperative future we envision, and I hope that you'll see that we're really not trying to be the villain or the enemy here, or even the competitor, but rather the collaborator in a future that may emerge in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerry. You can see that we have a really great panel and four very important perspectives. I'm going to just get the panel warmed up a little here for the hard questions that you're going to ask. And so a couple things that, I'll give you a couple questions that you can decide which ones you want to deal with. One of the words that I didn't hear in the presentations was resiliency. And I'm wondering what role in the future community choice will have in the resiliency that we might actually need, because we have, we have been mitigating climate change and doing a great job in California, but it's kind of late and too slow. And what about the things that we're going to have to adapt to? And so I'd like to have a couple of perspectives on resiliency. And then the other thing is community choice is a business. And in fact, thanks to our organizers, that's right, that's the first word, the business of local energy. Well, businesses nowadays, have to decide what they're really going to be good at, or they're not going to be successful. And what I'd like to ask a couple of the panelists to speak to is, okay, what is the one thing that they really have to be good at right now as they get started, and then in 5 years, and then in 10 years? And I'm going to make, you can say, well, whatever you start being good at, that's what you're going to be good at. I'll challenge that, but not too hard. But I think those, what do you need to be good at, are going to change significantly going forward. So I'm going to just say, pick your question. A couple of you pick one, and a couple of you pick the other, and we'll see what wisdom comes forward.
The skill sets for resiliency concern, I think, essentially a local planning process that crosses different kinds of knowledge. It's interdisciplinary knowledge. In other words, you have energy critical businesses that go all the way down to mom and pop stores, that had milk refrigeration, right? Little energy critical entities. You have larger commercial entities, and then you have the public environment, water pumping, dispatchable capacity, the capacity that can be automated, flexible capacity. You have crossovers of public areas of control, like public buildings, and you have land use planning knowledge within the county and local governments, the capacity to evaluate what's going on inside of buildings based upon a variety of data points that are often held by municipalities. And then you have the CCAs have access, as the utilities provide it, to the end-use meter data of every single customer. So the studies that I've done local power we're collecting this data for Sonoma County, for San Francisco County, and these were 5-year histories going back. So smart meters back a couple of years and the rest 5 years back. And those provide essentially an actual history of actual load in every building. This is a foundation for targeting and siting of DER. To cross these different layers so that you can achieve optimal economics based on the tariffs on the meter, based on the schedule of load on the sites, based on the land use, the ownership structure, even the duration of ownership on a site could affect security, financial security on a site, public access. I mean, there are all these different sort of layers of data which are necessary to evaluate sites and to acquire sites. In other words, to integrate them into a single plan so that the resilience benefit can be created. Because resilience ultimately is a benefit. When you create resilience, it's a tertiary benefit, because you want it to provide power and for it to be cost-effective power and to sell on a daily basis energy to customers who themselves will benefit from it. You want it to cause a system benefit at the low duration curve level so you can reduce fuels, another element of resiliency, right? The Hurricane Sandy hit, it didn't just cause blackouts, it caused the price of natural gas to triple. And it tripled all through the winter. And so if you have reduced fuel exposure, then you have greater resiliency in that secondary respect. But planning these together are ultimately crossing different criteria. And I agree that there has to be a lot of cooperation with the utility, because you have the sort of grid system level resiliency. Then you have the end user resiliency, and there's demand response in there and opportunities to monetize that. But then you also have the aggregate level, the economic resiliency of that whole aggregation. And that's really the bottom line for the CCA. So I really think it's a great opportunity for which municipalities are the natural agents.
We'll take another comment on resiliency.
I'll try to touch on that and maybe both those questions briefly. Oakland has a chief resiliency officer, and I think the Rockefeller Foundation funded dozens of cities around the country to do that for a few years, and we're actually in the middle of that right now. That's great. And one of the responsibilities is climate adaptation and so on. But again, as I said earlier, they're political challenges, because adaptation, resiliency, that's like, oh, you're planning for the long term. How many politicians think about the long term, right? It's like, what can we do next month, next year, maybe 2 years? And so when I talked about the importance of, securing or developing some wetlands as a buffer that we're eventually going to need when sea level rise kicks in, again, what planet am I living on was the reaction. And so, and this was in Oakland, a progressive city. So just as with how activist organizing and work created an interest and a demand, if you will, that led to local elected officials and folks in the community developing CCAs in Alameda County and in many of our other jurisdictions. Whatever we want the CCA to do that's of significance or new or big or meaningful, or other kinds of things that relate to being more resilient for our energy system or what have you, if they're long-term things or they're brand new things, they make most elected officials feel a little, ooh, that's risky. And so I come from before I was elected to office, I come from an activist background. I worked for the Union of Concerned Scientists for 9 years. So I get it, but most elected officials don't come from an advocacy background before they were elected. And certainly most don't come from an environmental background before they were elected. So there's a lot of work that we all have to do with our partners, with our environmental advocacy organizations, clean energy advocates and business folks to educate, organize, and inform our local elected leaders to make sure they do these things that everybody in this room says, oh, of course we have to do that. So that's answer to that. On the second question, just briefly, initially we have to make sure CCAs offer competitive or lower rates. I think we all know that, or else everybody's going to opt out, and that's not going to work. While at the same time making sure that we have a portfolio that has a lower greenhouse gas footprint than the alternative IOU. And that's all doable. As we've seen that's doable. We know it's doable. And then once we do that, slowly build up your portfolio, maybe not so slow, maybe more quickly than when people think, to have an even lower greenhouse gas footprint. And eventually, as some CCAs, or at least one CCA is already doing, kind of build in or put together, no, that's not the right word we're looking for, consolidate the energy efficiency programs and requirements in that jurisdiction or in that region and have a CCA kind of manage energy efficiency programs. I think eventually should happen. Not on day one, but I think at some point we're going to take those over as well.
So is this one working? Yes. So resiliency, that's the ability essentially to bounce back, to restore a status quo state after something has happened. So from an electric system perspective, really what we're talking about is something happens and a customer or customers lose power. We're talking about the ability to ensure that there's a restoration of that state of having power as quickly and effectively and efficiently as possible. So for customers, part of the path towards resiliency is these days sometimes acquiring some of one's own resources, like energy storage system, for instance, to quickly restore power in case there's some impact on the grid. From our perspective, as we look out, particularly at the emergence of a growth of customer choice and distributed energy resources and the changing needs of our customers, the only way for us to really effectively provide resiliency is to modernize our grid so that we can see what's happening at a level that we cannot today. If there's low voltage at the end of a line today, we often can only learn about it because a customer calls up and says they're having problems with some of their equipment. We want to be able to see that low voltage and essentially cure it before it causes a problem. Or if there is an outage that occurs, we want to be able to have sort of almost instantaneous electronic redistribution of the power in the grid to minimize the impact of that outage and then get restoration of service to as many customers as quickly as possible. For that, we need to take advantage of the new technologies, not just on the customer side of providing energy use, but the new technologies that exist today for having a grid that has these properties. It allows us the visibility and the automatic control and all that we can provide a resilient system to meet the emerging needs of this technology growth and changing in customer use and demand.
So I'll start by talking about the business model. I think the business model for CCAs is pretty simple and straightforward, right? It's to procure the most amount of clean energy at the lowest cost to ratepayers and with the highest value to the whole system. And it's that third one, the highest value to the system, that's now becoming more into focus, is going to enable CCAs to be able to finance successfully a lot more local energy systems, because those systems have a lot of value to everyone in the ecosystem, not just the fact that they're basically clean energy. So we're working on another CEC grant project to put energy storage in front of the meter in San Francisco at a location to increase the amount of solar that can be hosted by that location on the grid, and to provide backup power, so resilience to that section of the grid. And by the way, PG&E is a partner on that because they're exploring what it means to use DER to provide backup power, right? They're very interested. That's a value. And it's going to be a value that gets compensated. The other thing that's really important about this model is, you know, we get caught in these duck curve conversations, but those duck curves do not take into account energy storage. It's all just solar. So when you add energy storage into the distribution side of the grid, you're actually taking that head of that duck and you're patting it and you're putting it to sleep and it's laying down and going bye-bye, right? So it's not a problem. It's actually a solution to do local energy systems that are self-balancing in that way. And of course, these systems can provide services to the utilities and to the ISOs, whether it's capacity or frequency regulation or voltage regulation, right? So we're coming to a point where lots of clean energy, low cost. Now we're adding a optimal design methodology targeted to increase the value of these local energy systems, which increases the revenue they make. Think about discharging solar energy in the evening when the evening ramp is happening. That's going to be the biggest value on the grid coming up. So these systems actually provide all this value, and they will end up lowering the cost of financing and deploying them because of all these new values coming along. So to me, that's the business model. CCAs are the ones who can actually, you know, do this at scale.
Okay.
Just one quick addition to the energy storage part of that future. Another piece of that is the transportation electrification. In other words, people charging power during the day to deal with the duck curve, which again will probably involve effective cooperation between the energy provider and the distribution system operator.
Okay, they're warmed up, and we have about a little less than 15 minutes. I'm going to open it to all of you to ask questions of individual or the whole panel. Eric. The question is, what is the solution to the problem or the concern about potentially weak political leadership in certain cases?
Good question. Thank you for that. It's a very long answer. I'll try to shorten it just for a minute. One, organizing. There are advocacy groups, experts, clean energy businesses, the whole range of folks that many of us know or have been connected to in the past who need to be out there and not assume that, oh, well, you have a CCA or you have an elected official who's been talking the right talk when they ran for office. That doesn't mean anything. What they actually do means, and if they don't come from this world, it's like way low on their priority list. They care about affordable housing, public safety, poverty in their community, homeless. This is like way down the list. Oh yeah, we care about that too, but I'm busy with other stuff. Or it costs money, or perceived to cost money to even think about it, so they have to do other things. Or developers, your traditional housing developers or office developers, like this is not on their radar as much, and so for most of them. So there's organizing. Also, at least for many communities, certainly Oakland and many other jurisdictions, most in the state, the messengers need to reflect the diversity of the city that you're in or the jurisdiction that you're in. And often that's not the case when it comes to let me look at the room here, that comes to our efforts. So it's just like anything else you organize for. It takes a campaign plan and implementation and commitment and not winning right away and work. It's nothing new. There's no magic answer to this. It's just like any other campaign on an issue. This is just one more set of issues to campaign on. I think we have a good start. CCAs are not brand new any longer, and so we have some things that are tested and growing. And certainly in California, we have our state policies, and so it's not new. Most elected officials want to be on the bandwagon. They just don't know what to do, and they don't know that it's easy to do, or it's not as hard as they may think. We need to tell them that, show them that.
Gentleman with the upward-facing glasses. I think the question is, what's the, what's the smart city perspective on community choice, the Internet of Things, and how does that factor into our thinking, our forward-looking thinking?
Yeah. So it certainly will become increasingly possible for smart devices to provide useful information to the extent that, in fact, there's going to be those smart devices are providing information that's going to the operator of the distribution grid. But rather than waiting for third parties whose focus, might be on the impact on the equipment itself, if you have low frequency, I mean, they're not necessarily going to also be checking what's the voltage across the system associated with my refrigerator. It makes sense to take advantage, again, of the technology we have today through internet and other communication devices to have visibility across the grid to what's happening so that, again, we can manage it much more effectively, efficiently, improve reliability and resiliency from having a smarter grid. In other words, why would we want to have a smart set of devices out there, a smart system where people are serving a lot of their own needs, but a grid where we can't tell what's going on and we just have to hope that things work properly? And obviously, we also need to keep up with the improvements in technology to take best advantage of what's going to be happening out there, and that's what we're seeking to do.
Thank you, Gary. There are several questions, so what I'd like to ask is, I think we might be able to get through them, but we'll have to say short answers. Sir, in the infrastructure of the future that Gary showed, what would be the IOU role in financing it?
Yeah. So, again, I guess it depends on the specific basis for the development of the distributed resources. In the picture, there's photovoltaics, there's solar, there's transportation electrification. One possibility for using that set of distributed energy resources is to provide the right time of capacity, energy, voltage support to the distribution system to forestall the need for expansion of that distribution system investment. So my example before, that part of it would need to be a contract essentially between the distribution system operator, in this case it would be the utility, and that set of distributed energy resources. However, if this is an area where there's a community choice aggregator that's meeting the energy needs of that community, then the utility isn't the one seeking the energy and capacity of the grid to meet its energy and capacity needs. It's just seeking the timing of the use of those resources to ensure reliability of the distribution grid. So the energy and capacity, if it's not actually being needed in the instant to satisfy that distribution reliability need, should be more logically contracted with the local community choice energy provider or community choice aggregator, depending on which acronym we're using, to satisfy their needs. So that's where, in a sense, there's going to have to be some level of cooperation, because you're talking about the distribution energy service provider hopefully providing and getting compensated for multiple services, reliability services to the distribution operator and energy and capacity services to satisfy the local community energy needs. That's the vision I was trying to describe.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Ma'am? How can community choice programs and utilities take better advantage of demand response opportunities?
So let me go quickly, because as the utility guy. So first of all of the above, that's certainly true. Running your dishwasher and washing machine in the middle of the day, when we're facing the belly of the duck curve, makes sense, and we should see that through a more effective time of use pricing in the future, so that you have an incentive to do that. And it's also absolutely true, though, that if solar continues to grow as the cheap renewable resource we see in the future, we're still going to have operational challenges that may make storage or some other way to manage that operational challenge necessary.
Yeah, I would just answer it this way. I agree completely with the question and the opportunity, right, for IoT to do this. My answer to that, or the additional thought to add to that, is the same thought that we add when people talk about energy efficiency alone as the way to get here. So we need everything. We need all the above. And if we just relied on IoT, it would take us an enormous amount of years to get to a point where everybody's home and everybody's business is operating that way. Now, eventually we'll get there, but in the meantime, we've got some major issues in front of us that we've got to address and get, oil and gas out of the energy system. And that's going to take CCAs, utilities, power producers, technology people, IoT, energy storage, solar. It's going to take everything and us looking at that whole picture and figuring out how to get there faster, more economically, and using IoT. Sorry. Oh, what is IoT? Oh, somebody's asking, the Internet of Things. That means things using data and communicating with each other with data using the internet, so they can be automated. So in any case, all I'm saying is that we've got to get there. We've got to have programs in place to get us there, and it includes all of the above.
If I could just add really quickly, I would agree that it's the lowest cost, lowest carbon, lowest polluting resource. That automation is, it's a $50 radio. It is the equivalent of wireless communication for energy, and so it should be essentially embedded as a product for every CCA customer. An IP thermostat should be sent to the doorstep of every customer of a CCA, and that is your sort of portal into selling IP-enabled appliances and really opening up this market within a CCA. And batteries really should just be considered a supplement to that as needed. But I would agree that you want to start light and build out from there.
Well, regrettably, thank you very much, panelists, and regrettably we are out of time, although I assume the panel would welcome the opportunity to interact with all of you, not all of you, but any of you whose questions didn't get answered while we're wrapping up here. But I really want to ask you to give the panel a big round of applause.
And let's thank the moderator as well.
And thank you.